The blistering sun cast long shadows across Cody, Wyoming's dusty Main Street, as Sophia Zimmerman marched purposefully toward the town hall, clutching a carefully prepared petition in her trembling hands, not from fear, but from righteous indignation that had been building for months. At 26, with her chestnut hair pulled back in a practical bun and determination etched across her features, Sophia had spent weeks gathering signatures to demand improvements to the town's inadequate water system, a problem that disproportionately affected the eastern quarter where most working families lived. The year was 1883, and Cody was transforming from a rough frontier settlement into a proper town, complete with the political maneuverings and power struggles that accompanied such growth. Mayor Edwin Hollister and his circle of businessmen had called for a town election to determine the allocation of funds for various improvement projects, but their discussions had conspicuously excluded any female input, despite the fact that women managed households and dealt with the practical consequences of the town's infrastructure failures daily. Sophia pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the town hall just as Mayor Hollister was concluding his opening remarks. The assembled men, shopkeepers, ranchers, and businessmen turned to stare as she entered. Some faces registered surprise, others amusement, and a few showed open hostility. "Miss Zimmerman," Mayor Hollister said with exaggerated patience, "this is an official town meeting for voting citizens. I'm afraid you'll need to—" "I'm well aware of what this is, Mayor," Sophia interrupted, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "I've brought a petition signed by over 60 residents regarding the water situation on the east side. People are getting sick. Children are getting sick." Councilman Porter, a portly banker with investments throughout the county, chuckled. "Miss Zimmerman, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but these matters require a practical understanding of municipal finances and engineering considerations that are, frankly, beyond the scope of—" "Beyond the scope of what, Mr. Porter?" "My understanding," Sophia countered, her green eyes flashing. "I've been maintaining the account books for my father's mercantile since I was 16. I've researched water systems in 3 comparable towns, and I'm the one who has to watch Mrs. Abernathy's children while she recovers from typhoid that your practical understanding failed to prevent." A tense silence fell over the room. At the back, leaning against the wall with arms crossed, stood a man Sophia had noticed around town but never properly met. Tall, with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin, he observed the scene with a curious intensity in his blue eyes. Mayor Hollister cleared his throat. "Miss Zimmerman, we've already set the agenda for today's meeting. Perhaps you could leave your petition with my secretary and we'll consider it at an appropriate time." "And when would that be, Mayor?" "After the election decides to route the new pipelines to the western developments where all of you have property interests." Sophia held her ground, though she knew the battle was already lost. The mayor's tightening expression confirmed it. "That will be quite enough," Hollister said firmly. "Thompson, would you please escort Miss Zimmerman outside? We have important matters to discuss." As the deputy sheriff approached, Sophia felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She'd expected resistance but not outright dismissal. She placed her petition on the nearest table with deliberate care. "I'll leave, but this isn't finished," she said, dignified despite her racing heart. "Those 60 signatures represent families who vote or whose husbands and fathers vote. They'll remember this come election day." She turned and walked out, head held high, though inside she was seething. Outside on the boardwalk, Sophia leaned against a post, trying to compose herself before returning to the mercantile where her father would be expecting her help with the afternoon inventory. That was quite a speech. The deep voice startled her. Sophia turned to find the blue-eyed man from the meeting standing a few feet away, his expression thoughtful rather than mocking. "I didn't realize I'd acquired an audience," she replied, wary but curious. "Colt Wakefield," he introduced himself, touching the brim of his hat. "Most folks call me Colt." Sophia Zimmerman. She studied him more carefully, now lean but strong, with a quiet confidence that distinguished him from the town's more boisterous cowboys. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but of good quality. "Are you new to Cody, Mr. Wakefield?" "Returned, not new," he corrected with a slight smile. "I grew up about 20 miles west of here. Been away the past 8 years, working cattle drives, then managing a ranch near Cheyenne. And now I've come back to start something of my own. Just purchased the old Morrison property." He nodded toward the hills visible beyond the town. "But I find myself walking into the middle of what seems like quite a situation here." Sophia sighed, some of her defensive posture easing. "The water system in this town is a disgrace. When it rains, the eastern quarter floods because there's no proper drainage. When it's dry, the wells run low because they weren't dug deep enough. And now the council wants to spend all the town's improvement money on new pipes for the western developments where they're selling lots at premium prices." To her surprise, Colt nodded thoughtfully. "I noticed the standing water by the miller's place, breeding ground for disease." "Exactly. But they won't listen to," she stopped herself, embarrassed by her outburst. "Forgive me, this isn't your concern." "Actually," he said, "it is. I was at that meeting because I need to understand where this town is headed before I commit to certain investments. I'd planned to speak with Hollister afterward, but now I'm thinking I should hear more about what's happening on the east side." Sophia regarded him skeptically. "Why would you care about the east side? The Morrison property is west of town." "Because a town that neglects part of itself isn't stable or healthy. That affects everyone eventually." His eyes met hers directly. "Would you be willing to show me the problems firsthand? I'd value seeing things through your eyes." The request surprised her. Men in Cody rarely sought a woman's opinion on matters beyond home and children, and certainly not on town planning or public works. "You actually want my perspective?" she asked cautiously. Colt nodded, his expression serious. "I trust your mind, Miss Zimmerman. You clearly understand the situation better than those men in there, and you care about the whole town, not just your own interests. That's worth more than all their self-important posturing." Something shifted in Sophia's chest, a feeling of being truly seen for perhaps the first time since returning to Cody after 2 years teaching school in Denver. She had come back when her mother died to help her father, only to find herself increasingly frustrated by the limitations placed on her here. "Very well, Mr. Wakefield," she said, making up her mind. "Meet me at Zimmerman's Mercantile tomorrow at 2. I'll show you everything they don't want you to see." He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "I'll be there." As he touched his hat brim again and walked away, Sophia found herself wondering what exactly had just happened, and why the prospect of tomorrow's meeting made her feel both nervous and strangely hopeful. The next day arrived hot and cloudless, typical of Wyoming in late June. Sophia had spent the morning helping customers and organizing shipments at the mercantile, all while trying to ignore her father's curious glances whenever she checked the clock. Jacob Zimmerman was a kind man but conventional in his thinking. He had supported Sophia's education and even her brief teaching career. But since her return to Cody, he'd made it increasingly clear that he hoped she would consider the occasional suitors who came calling, respectable men like the widowed Dr. Thomas or young Mr. Elkins from the bank. At precisely 2 o'clock, the bell above the shop door jingled and Colt Wakefield stepped inside. He'd cleaned up since yesterday, his dark hair neatly combed and his clothes fresh, though he still had the weathered look of a man who spent most of his time outdoors. "Mr. Wakefield," Sophia greeted him, conscious of her father's interested gaze from behind the counter. "You're punctual." "My mother would accept nothing less," he replied with a slight smile. "Mr. Zimmerman, I presume?" "Colt Wakefield, sir." He extended his hand to her father. Jacob shook it firmly. "What brings you to our establishment, Mr. Wakefield?" "Looking for supplies for the Morrison place. Heard you took that on." "Indeed I did, but today I'm here to learn about the town's water situation. Your daughter has agreed to show me the problems on the east side." Colt's direct approach took Sophia by surprise. Most men would have invented some pretext rather than admitting to seeking her guidance. "Has she now?" Jacob's eyebrows rose as he looked between them. "Sophia is quite knowledgeable, but I wasn't aware she'd become an expert on water systems." "Father," Sophia interjected, "Mr. Wakefield was at yesterday's town meeting. He saw how the council dismissed the petition." Jacob's expression softened. "Ah, I see. Well, Mr. Wakefield, you couldn't ask for a more informed guide. My daughter may be passionate about her causes, but she does her research thoroughly." "I've already seen evidence of that," Colt replied. His respectful tone seemed to reassure her father. "Go on then," Jacob said to Sophia. "Mrs. Peterson can help me with inventory when she arrives. Just be back before closing." Minutes later, they were walking east from the town center, Sophia pointing out problems as they went. The inadequate drainage ditches, the poorly constructed wells, and the disparity in services between different parts of town. Most of these issues could be resolved with relatively simple improvements, she explained as they stood beside a fetid puddle that hadn't dried despite days without rain. But the council keeps postponing action, claiming budget constraints while approving expansions to the western quarter. "Where the property values are higher," Colt observed. "Exactly. And where they all own lots." They continued walking, passing modest homes where women hung laundry and children played in dusty yards. Several residents nodded to Sophia, and she introduced Colt, explaining his interest in the water situation. The reactions ranged from surprise to cautious appreciation. "The families here aren't asking for charity," Sophia said as they turned down another street. "They pay their taxes. They contribute to this community. They simply want the same considerations given to wealthier neighborhoods." Colt listened attentively, asking questions that revealed a practical understanding of construction and water management. He jotted occasional notes in a small book he carried. "This culvert here," he said, kneeling to examine a partially collapsed drainage channel. "It's not just poorly built, it's dangerous. After heavy rain, the pressure could cause it to fail completely and flood several homes." "That's what I've been trying to tell the council," Sophia agreed, impressed by his quick assessment. "But they insist their engineer says it's adequate." "Their engineer is either incompetent or being pressured to approve substandard work," Colt said bluntly. "I've seen similar construction on ranches in Colorado. It fails every time." They spent 2 hours surveying the area, ending at a small spring that served several households when the wells ran low. "The water table here is actually excellent," Sophia explained. "With proper wells and a modest reservoir system, the eastern quarter would have ample water even in dry seasons. I've drawn up plans based on what I observed in Denver, but they won't look at them," Colt finished for her. "Mayor Hollister said it wouldn't be appropriate for me to present such technical information to the council." The memory still stung. "As if having feminine sensibilities somehow prevents me from understanding how water flows downhill." Colt's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Their loss. These are good ideas, practical ones. Much better than what I heard proposed yesterday." They started walking back toward town, the late afternoon sun casting their shadows long before them. Sophia felt oddly comfortable in Colt's presence. Unlike many men she'd encountered, he listened without interrupting and considered her words carefully before responding. "May I ask you something, Mr. Wakefield?" "Colt, please." "Colt, then. Why are you really interested in all this? The Morrison property won't be affected by these issues." He was silent for a moment, choosing his words. "I came back to Cody to build something lasting, not just a ranch but a life. That means being part of a community that works for everyone, not just the fortunate few." He glanced at her. "My father was a good man, but narrow in his thinking. He believed a man's only responsibility was to his own land and family. I've seen enough of the world to know that's not true." "That's refreshing to hear," Sophia admitted. "Most men in Cody seem to share your father's view. Most men haven't had to rely on neighbors during a blizzard that killed half their cattle, or seen how one family's typhoid can spread through a whole valley." His voice had a gravity that spoke of hard-earned wisdom. "The world's changing, Miss Zimmerman. Those who don't understand that communities rise or fall together will be left behind." "Sophia," she offered, feeling a connection to this man's vision that resonated with her own. "If I'm to call you Colt, you should call me Sophia." They had reached the mercantile. The afternoon was waning, and customers would soon arrive for evening shopping. "Thank you for the tour, Sophia," Colt said, genuine appreciation in his eyes. "You've given me much to think about." "What will you do with this information?" she asked, curious about his intentions. "For now, I'll complete my assessment. Then, with your permission, I'd like to discuss potential solutions. I have some ideas, but I'd value your insight before proceeding." "My insight?" Sophia couldn't hide her surprise. "That would be most welcome." "Good. Are you free the day after tomorrow? Perhaps we could meet at the cafe for lunch to discuss it further." The invitation was proper enough a public place, a business discussion, yet Sophia felt a flutter of something beyond professional interest. She tamped it down firmly. Colton Wakefield was being respectful and practical, nothing more. "That would be fine, noon. Noon it is." He tipped his hat. "Until then, Sophia." As she watched him walk away, Sophia realized she was looking forward to their next meeting far more than was sensible for a simple discussion of water systems. The following morning, Sophia was still contemplating her tour with Colt when the mercantile door opened to reveal Councilman Porter and his wife. Their appearance wasn't unusual. Porter's hardware couldn't stock everything, and they occasionally purchased items from Zimmerman's, but the timing felt significant. "Good morning, Mr. Porter, Mrs. Porter." Sophia greeted them professionally. "Mrs." Porter nodded politely while her husband surveyed the store with an affected casualness. "Miss Zimmerman, I understand you've been conducting tours of the Eastern Quarter, quite the guide service you're operating." The veiled disapproval in his tone was unmistakable. News traveled fast in Cody. "Hardly a service, Mr. Porter. Mr. Wakefield expressed interest in understanding town issues, and I showed him what I know." Sophia maintained her composure, though inwardly she bristled. "Yes, Wakefield." Porter's mouth twisted slightly. "You should be cautious about the company you keep, Miss Zimmerman. Not everyone who purchases property here has the town's best interests at heart." "I'm perfectly capable of judging character, thank you," she replied evenly, noticing how Mrs. Porter shifted uncomfortably beside her husband. "Are you?" A young woman with passionate ideas about matters beyond her sphere might easily be misled by someone with an agenda. Porter selected a tin of tobacco from the shelf, examining it with exaggerated interest. "Wakefield has been asking questions all over town, questions that suggest he may have political ambitions that could complicate matters for those of us who have guided Cody's growth for years. Sophia felt a chill despite the warm day. Porter wasn't just expressing disapproval, he was issuing a warning. "What exactly are you implying, Mr. Porter?" "Nothing at all," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Merely offering friendly advice. Your father's business depends on good relations with the town's established families. It would be unfortunate if your activities were to affect that." The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. Before Sophia could respond, her father emerged from the storeroom. "George, Martha," Jacob greeted them. "What brings you in today?" As Porter engaged her father in seemingly cordial conversation, Sophia moved to help another customer, her mind racing. The encounter confirmed her suspicions about the council's protectiveness of their power, but it also raised questions about Colt. What agenda might he have that would worry Porter so much? And was she, in her eagerness to find an ally, overlooking something important? These questions lingered as she met Colt for lunch 2 days later at Adeline's cafe. The small restaurant was busy with the midday crowd, providing both public propriety and enough ambient noise for private conversation. "You seem preoccupied," Colt observed after they'd ordered. Sophia hesitated, then decided directness was best. "Councilman Porter came to the Mercantile yesterday. He seemed quite concerned about our tour of the Eastern Quarter and about your questions around town." If she expected defensiveness, Colt surprised her. He nodded thoughtfully. "I thought that might happen. Porter and his associates are protective of their influence. Any outsider asking questions threatens that." He implied you have political ambitions. A wry smile crossed Colt's face. "The only thing I'm ambitious about is building a successful ranch and seeing this town prosper for everyone." But men like Porter see any challenge to their authority as a political move. And is it? A challenge, I mean. Their food arrived: beef stew for him, chicken pie for her, creating a momentary pause. Colt waited until the waitress left before answering. "I believe in speaking truth and acting on it," he said finally. "If that constitutes a challenge, then perhaps it is, but my interest is practical, not political." He reached into his coat and withdrew several folded papers. "I've drafted some preliminary plans based on what we observed and my own assessment. I'd value your thoughts." As he spread the papers on the table, Sophia's concerns about his motives receded. The drawings showed a thoughtful redesign of the Eastern Quarter's drainage system, with detailed notes about materials, labor requirements, and cost estimates. "This is impressive," she said, genuinely surprised by the thoroughness. "You did all this in 2 days." "I don't sleep much," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile, "and I had excellent information to work from." For the next hour, they discussed the plans, Sophia pointing out considerations he'd missed and Colt making adjustments. Their conversation flowed easily, ideas building upon one another in a way Sophia had rarely experienced. By the time they finished their meal, they had developed a solid proposal for addressing the most critical water issues. "The question now," Colt said as he carefully refolded the plans, "is how to present this to the council in a way they can't easily dismiss." "They'll dismiss anything I bring forward," Sophia replied, the frustration evident in her voice. "And after Porter's warning, they'll be suspicious of you as well." Colt considered this. "What if we approach it differently? Instead of confronting them directly, what if we build support among influential townspeople first? Once enough respected citizens back the plan, the council will find it harder to ignore." "That could work," Sophia said, warming to the idea. "Dr. Wallace has been concerned about disease from the standing water. And Mr. Jameson at the bank has family on the east side. He might see the economic benefits." "Exactly. We create a coalition too broad to dismiss. Colt leaned forward, his eyes bright with purpose. This isn't just about water, Sophia. It's about what kind of town Cody will become. Will it be ruled by a few for their benefit, or will it grow into a community where everyone has a voice? The passion in his words resonated deeply with her. That's what I've been trying to say all along, but no one seems to listen. I'm listening, he said quietly. And together, I think we can make others listen too. As they left the cafe, Sophia felt a renewed sense of purpose and something else, a growing warmth whenever she looked at Colt that had nothing to do with civic improvements. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing on their plans, but it lingered nevertheless. I'll speak with Dr. Wallace tomorrow, she said as they stood outside the cafe. And perhaps Mrs. Hargrove, her women's charitable society, has more influence than the council likes to admit. Good thinking. I'll approach Jameson and a few of the ranchers I knew from before. Colt hesitated, then added, would you be willing to meet again in a few days to discuss our progress? Perhaps Saturday afternoon? Yes, I'd like that. Sophia was conscious of several townspeople watching their interaction with interest. Cody thrived on gossip, and a prolonged public conversation between a single woman and a bachelor newcomer would certainly generate talk. Yet somehow she found she didn't mind. Until Saturday then. Colt tipped his hat, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than strictly necessary before he turned and walked away. Sophia watched him go, aware that something fundamental had shifted. They had begun with a shared interest in the town's welfare, but she could no longer pretend that was all that drew her to Colt Wakefield. The realization was both exhilarating and unsettling. Over the next several days, Sophia and Colt quietly met with various townspeople, building support for their water improvement plan. The strategy proved effective by presenting practical solutions rather than complaints. They found many were receptive to their ideas. Dr. Wallace, concerned about public health, became an enthusiastic advocate. Been saying this for years, he told Sophia. Those stagnant pools are breeding disease. Mayor Hollister keeps promising action after every typhoid case, but nothing changes. Mrs. Hargrove, the formidable president of the Ladies' Charitable Society, reviewed their plans with surprising technical understanding. My late husband was an engineer, she explained. This is sound work. I'll discuss it at our next meeting. Even Mr. Jameson at the bank, initially cautious, warmed to the proposal when Colt framed it in terms of property values and economic stability. Can't have half the town susceptible to flooding and disease, he acknowledged. Bad for business, bad for growth. By the time Saturday arrived, Sophia felt cautiously optimistic. She met Colt at the small park near the church, where they could talk without the scrutiny they'd face in more public settings. The late afternoon was pleasantly warm, with cottonwood seeds floating like summer snow in the gentle breeze. We're making progress, Colt said after they'd exchanged information about their respective meetings. More than I expected, honestly. People care about this town, Sophia replied, watching children play nearby. They just needed someone to articulate the problems and offer real solutions. You've been trying to do that for months, Colt pointed out. What's different now? Sophia considered this. Partly your approach practical plans rather than petitions, and partly. She hesitated, then decided honesty was best. Partly that you're a man with property and prospects. They take you seriously in ways they won't take me. Colt frowned. That's their loss. Your understanding of this community runs deeper than mine ever could. Perhaps, but I've learned to be practical about these things. She smiled to soften the words. If we achieve the improvements, does it matter whose voice carried the message? It matters to me, he said quietly. And it should matter to Cody. The sincerity in his voice touched her. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the lengthening shadows. "Tell me about Denver," Colt said eventually. "Your father mentioned you taught school there." "For 2 years," Sophia nodded. "It was liberating. Denver is changing rapidly, new ideas, new opportunities. Women there are becoming doctors, lawyers, business owners. My friend Harriet is studying medicine at the university." "You sound like you miss it." "Parts of it," she admitted. "But family obligations called me home." She didn't elaborate on her mother's illness and death, but something in Colt's expression suggested he understood the unspoken. "You plan to return someday?" It was a question Sophia often asked herself. "I don't know. Father needs me here, at least for now." And despite its frustrations, Cody is home. She glanced at him. "What about you? You left for 8 years. What brought you back?" Colt looked toward the distant mountains, his expression thoughtful. "I needed to leave to figure out who I was apart from my father's expectations. He wanted me to take over our small ranch, marry a local girl, live exactly as he had." He smiled slightly. "I was too restless for that, needed to see more, learn more. And did you learn what you needed, eventually?" His eyes returned to hers. "Working other men's ranches taught me what I wanted to build for myself, and what kind of man I wanted to be." "What kind is that?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious. "The kind who stands by his word, who treats people fairly, regardless of their station, who builds rather than extracts." He shook his head self-consciously. "Sounds high-minded, I suppose." "No," Sophia said softly. "It sounds like exactly what Cody needs more of." Their eyes met, and for a moment Sophia felt a connection that transcended their shared civic project. There was something in Colt's gaze, warmth, admiration, perhaps something more that made her heart beat faster. The moment was broken by the church bell chiming 5 o'clock. Sophia stood, suddenly aware of how long they'd been talking. "I should get back. Father will worry." Colt rose as well. "Of course. When shall we meet next?" "The town council convenes on Tuesday. We should consolidate our supporters before then." "Monday afternoon. I could come to your property, see how the work is progressing." The invitation was forward but justified by their collaboration. Still, Sophia felt a flutter of nervousness as she made it. "I'd like that," Colt replied. "Around 2. I can send the wagon to fetch you. No need I ride, just give me directions." He smiled, a hint of admiration in his expression. "Of course you do. Take the western road past Miller's Creek, then the northern fork for about 3 miles. You'll see the gate with the new fencing. I'll be there." As they parted ways, Sophia reflected on the unexpected turn her campaign for town improvements had taken. What had begun as frustration with the council had evolved into a partnership that increasingly felt like something more, something both promising and dangerous to her carefully ordered life. Monday dawned clear and warm. Sophia completed her morning chores with efficient haste, trying to ignore her father's knowing looks as she mentioned her plans to ride out to the Wakefield property. "Business discussion, is it?" Jacob asked mildly as she prepared to leave. "Yes, father. We're gathering support for the water improvement proposal. MMM." He adjusted his spectacles. "Wakefield seems a decent sort. Practical mind. Good with his hands, too. He fixed that loose shelf for Mrs. Abernathy, did you know? Wouldn't take payment." "I didn't know that," Sophia replied, wondering what else Colt had been doing around town that she hadn't heard about. "Just an observation," her father said, returning to his ledger. "Enjoy your ride, daughter." The journey to Colt's property took just under an hour at a comfortable pace. Sophia enjoyed the solitude, and the landscape, rolling hills giving way to pine forests in the distance, wildflowers dotting the grassy meadows. When she spotted the new fencing Colt had described, She felt an unexpected flutter of anticipation. The Morrison property had been neglected for years after Old Man Morrison died without heirs. The main house, a substantial log structure, stood on a rise overlooking a small creek. As Sophia approached, she could see significant improvements already underway: new roof shingles, repaired steps, fresh paint on the window frames. The barn had been completely resided, and corrals constructed beyond it. Colt emerged from the barn as she rode up, wiping his hands on a cloth. He wore simple work clothes, a far cry from his neat appearance in town, but somehow the sight of him in his element made Sophia's breath catch. "Right on time," he called, smiling as he approached to help her dismount. His hands were strong and steady as they spanned her waist, lifting her effortlessly to the ground. "What do you think of the place?" "It's lovely," she said truthfully, looking around at the setting. "You've accomplished a great deal already. Much left to do, but it's coming along." Pride was evident in his voice. "Let me show you around, then we can talk business over coffee. Mrs. Larson, my housekeeper, just baked bread." The next hour passed pleasantly as Colt led Sophia through the house and outbuildings, explaining his plans for each. The main house was spacious but simply furnished, with large windows capturing the mountain views. What struck Sophia most was how thoughtfully everything was arranged, practical, but with an eye for comfort and beauty. "This was the parlor," Colt explained as they entered a sunlit room with freshly plastered walls. "But I'm converting it to a library. Always wanted a proper place for books." Sophia ran her hand along the empty shelves he'd built along one wall. "It's beautiful work. You did this yourself?" "Most of it. Hired the Swenson brothers for some of the heavier construction, but I enjoy working with my hands." He watched her examining the craftsmanship. "What do you think of these heights for the shelves? I wasn't sure if they were too tall." "They're perfect," she said, touched that he would ask her opinion on something so personal. "Though you might want a rolling ladder for the highest ones." "Exactly what I was thinking," he agreed, pleased. "I've drawn up plans for one." As they continued the tour, Sophia noticed that Colt consistently asked for her thoughts about the kitchen layout, the placement of the vegetable garden, even the type of fencing for different pastures. He listened to her responses carefully, sometimes adjusting his plans based on her suggestions. Eventually, they settled at the kitchen table with coffee and fresh bread. Mrs. Larson, a cheerful widow in her 50s, served them before discreetly retiring to the garden, leaving the door conspicuously ajar for propriety's sake. "Now," Colt said, spreading out their water system plans, "I've spoken with most of the people on our list. Jameson is cautiously supportive. He'll back us if enough others do. The ranchers are divided, but Henderson and Thompson are firmly with us. They've had problems with contaminated water affecting their herds." Sophia nodded. "Dr. Wallace has convinced 3 other business owners, and Mrs. Hargrove's society is preparing a formal statement of support." She hesitated. "But there's been pushback from Porter and his allies." "Yes. They've been visiting the mercantile, making comments. Nothing direct, but implications that Father's business might suffer if I continue to stir up trouble." Anger flashed in Colt's eyes. "That's unacceptable. Have you told your father? He knows. Says not to worry, that the store has weathered worse." She sighed. "But I don't like putting him in this position." Colt reached across the table, briefly covering her hand with his. The touch was warm, reassuring. "If you want to step back, I understand. I can continue advancing the plan." "No," Sophia said firmly, though she didn't withdraw her hand. "That's exactly what they want, to silence me. I won't give them that satisfaction." A smile of admiration spread across Colt's face. "I didn't think you would, but I had to offer." Their eyes held for a long moment. Sophia was acutely aware of his hand still covering hers, of the quiet kitchen, of the tension building between them that had nothing to do with town politics. Finally, Colt gently withdrew his hand. "We should finalize our approach for tomorrow's council meeting. I think our best strategy is to have multiple respected citizens speak in support, rather than presenting it as just our initiative." Sophia nodded, trying to refocus on the matter at hand despite the lingering warmth where his fingers had touched hers. "Agreed, Doctor. Wallace has agreed to speak first, focusing on public health concerns. Then Mr. Henderson on the economic impacts." They spent the next hour refining their strategy, arranging which supporters would speak and in what order, anticipating counter-arguments from the council, and preparing responses. Throughout, Sophia was struck by how perfectly they complemented each other, her detailed knowledge of the town and its politics, balancing his practical experience and strategic thinking. As the afternoon waned, Sophia reluctantly acknowledged she should return to town. "Of course," Colt said, walking her to where her horse was tethered. "Thank you for coming all this way." "I enjoyed seeing your home," she replied truthfully. "You've created something special here. It's a work in progress." He helped her mount, his hands lingering slightly at her waist. "Like our town improvement plans. Let's hope tomorrow brings progress on that front," Sophia said, settling into the saddle. "Whatever happens at the council meeting," Colt said, looking up at her with sudden intensity, "I want you to know I've never met anyone like you, Sophia. Your intelligence, your courage, your commitment to what's right, they are remarkable." The unexpected declaration made her cheeks warm. "I could say the same about you, Colt. Perhaps," his smile was gentle, "we recognize in each other what others have overlooked." The simplicity and truth of his words touched something deep inside her. "Perhaps we do." As Sophia rode back to town, she found herself contemplating not just the council meeting ahead, but the growing certainty that Colt Wakefield was becoming far more important to her than any town improvement project. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. The town hall was unusually crowded the following evening. Word had spread about the water improvement proposal, drawing citizens from all quarters of Cody. Sophia sat with her father near the front, conscious of the whispers and glances directed her way. Colt stood at the back, as was his habit, nodding respectfully to those who acknowledged him. Mayor Hollister called the meeting to order with visible surprise at the turnout. "We have a full agenda tonight, so we'll proceed efficiently," he announced, clearly hoping to minimize discussion. But when the time came for citizen comments, Dr. Wallace rose before the mayor could move to the next agenda item. "Mr. Mayor, council members, I wish to address an urgent matter of public health," the doctor began, his authoritative voice commanding attention. "The inadequate water and drainage systems in the eastern quarter have contributed to 3 cases of typhoid this year alone, plus numerous less severe illnesses." Councilman Porter shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Wallace, we're well aware of your concerns, but the budget will be strained far more by an epidemic," Wallace interrupted, uncharacteristically forceful. "I've reviewed a comprehensive improvement plan that addresses the most critical issues at reasonable cost. Several citizens collaborated on this proposal, and I strongly urge the council to consider it." Before Porter could respond, Mr. Henderson, one of the area's most successful ranchers, stood. "I support the doctor's recommendation. This isn't just about the eastern quarter. Contaminated water affects livestock throughout the region. My cattle were sickened last spring from drinking downstream." One by one, supporters rose to speak. Mrs. Hargrove emphasizing the hardships faced by families, Mr. Jameson noting the economic benefits of infrastructure improvements. even Reverend Miller citing moral obligations to care for all parts of the community. Mayor Hollister looked increasingly uncomfortable as the testimonials continued. When Mrs. Abernathy described her children's illnesses from contaminated water, several council members exchanged concerned glances. Finally, Sophia stood. The room quieted immediately. "Mr. Mayor, honorable council members," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "For months, I've tried to bring these concerns to your attention. You've dismissed them, suggesting that a woman couldn't possibly understand such technical matters." Porter started to interrupt, but Hollister, reading the room, motioned for him to be silent. "Today," Sophia continued, "you've heard from doctor, banker, rancher, and minister, all respected men whose judgment you value. They support the very solutions I've advocated. I now formally request that the council review the comprehensive proposal we've prepared." She approached the council table and placed the bound document before them. "This includes engineering specifications, cost estimates, and implementation timelines. It addresses the most urgent needs first, with provisions for phased improvements as funds permit." Councilman Miller, who had remained silent throughout, opened the document with evident curiosity. "This is remarkably detailed. Who prepared these technical drawings?" Before Sophia could answer, Colt stepped forward from the back of the room. "I assisted with the engineering aspects, Councilman. But the concept and much of the research came from Miss Zimmerman. Her understanding of the town's needs guided the entire project." His public acknowledgement of her contribution sent a murmur through the crowd. Sophia felt a rush of gratitude for his willingness to share credit when he could easily have claimed the technical work as entirely his own. Mayor Hollister cleared his throat. "Mr. Wakefield, while we appreciate citizen input, these matters typically require professional engineering consultation. I studied civil engineering at the University in Denver before circumstances called me back to ranching," Colt replied. "And I've implemented similar water management systems on 3 ranches in Wyoming and Colorado. I'd be happy to provide references." This revelation clearly surprised the council. Porter leaned over to whisper something to Hollister, who nodded slowly. "The council will need time to review this proposal thoroughly," the mayor announced. "We'll form a committee to assess its feasibility and report back at next month's meeting." It wasn't the immediate action Sophia had hoped for, but it was far more than she'd achieved in months of petitioning. As the meeting moved to other business, she caught Colt's eye across the room. He gave her a slight nod and a smile that conveyed both pride and shared accomplishment. After the meeting adjourned, supporters gathered around Sophia and Colt, congratulating them on the presentation. Even some who had been skeptical approached to examine the plans more closely. "You did it," Jacob said quietly to his daughter as they prepared to leave. "They're actually listening." "We did it," Sophia corrected, watching as Colt patiently answered technical questions from Councilman Miller. "It took all of us." Later, as the crowd dispersed into the warm summer evening, Colt fell into step beside Sophia and her father as they walked toward the mercantile. "That went better than expected," he observed. "Indeed it did," Jacob agreed. "Though I suspect we're just seeing the beginning of a longer battle." "Most worthwhile fights are long ones," Colt replied. He turned to Sophia. "Your presentation was perfect, clear, factual, impossible to dismiss. As was your timely revelation about your engineering background," she said with a knowing smile. "You might have mentioned that earlier, and missed the look on Porter's face when I did." "Never." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Besides, I wanted them to consider the plan on its merits, not my credentials." They reached the mercantile, pausing outside. Jacob, sensing the current between them, tactfully mentioned needing to check on something inside and bid Colt good night, leaving them momentarily alone on the boardwalk. "Thank you," Sophia said once her father had gone inside, "for acknowledging my contribution publicly. You didn't have to do that." "I absolutely did," Colt replied seriously. "It was the truth. This whole project began with your vision and perseverance." "Still, most men would have. I'm not most men, Sophia." His voice was soft but certain. "At least, I try not to be." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her hand, despite being in full view of anyone passing by. Instead, he maintained a respectful distance, though his eyes conveyed feelings that propriety wouldn't allow him to express. "Would you ride out to the property again later this week?" he asked. "There are some improvements I'd like your opinion on, and Mrs. Larson mentioned she'd enjoy your company for tea." Sophia smiled, understanding that he was creating a respectable pretext for them to spend more time together. "I'd like that. Thursday afternoon. Thursday it is." He touched the brim of his hat. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night, Colt." As she watched him walk away, Sophia acknowledged to herself what she'd been feeling for weeks. This was no longer just a partnership of convenience or shared civic interest. She was falling in love with Colt Wakefield, his integrity, his respect for her mind, his quiet strength. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Inside, her father was waiting, his expression knowing but kind. "He's a good man, that Wakefield." "Yes," Sophia agreed softly. "I believe he is." Over the following weeks, Cody buzzed with discussion of the water improvement proposal. The Council's committee, pressured by public interest, conducted a surprisingly thorough review. Sophia and Colt were invited to answer questions and provide additional details, their expertise increasingly recognized even by former skeptics. Their collaboration afforded natural opportunities to spend time together, both in town and at Colt's property. Each visit deepened Sophia's appreciation for the man. He was thoughtful, principled, and unfailingly respectful of her mind and abilities. Their conversations ranged far beyond water systems to books, politics, dreams for the future, and personal histories. On a particularly beautiful August afternoon, they sat on the porch of Colt's now transformed house, reviewing the committee's latest questions about the proposal. The work was nearly complete, but they lingered, neither wanting to end their time together. "Councilman Miller actually asked an insightful question here," Sophia noted, pointing to a letter they'd received, "about phasing the reservoir expansion. He's been surprisingly supportive," Colt agreed. "I think he's genuinely concerned about the public health issues. Or he's positioning himself against Porter for the next mayoral election," Sophia suggested with a knowing smile. "Politics is never simple in Cody." "Speaking of politics," Colt said, setting aside the papers, "there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." His serious tone made Sophia look up. "What is it?" "Several people have approached me about running for town council in the November election." "Really?" Sophia wasn't entirely surprised. Colt had impressed many with his knowledge and fair-mindedness. "What did you tell them?" "That I'd consider it." He studied her reaction carefully. "What do you think?" The fact that he genuinely wanted her opinion, even on something so personal, touched her deeply. "I think you'd bring exactly what the council needs: practical knowledge, integrity, and a commitment to the whole community." "High praise," he said with a slight smile. "But would it create complications for our friendship? If I became part of the very system you've been fighting?" The hesitation before friendship wasn't lost on Sophia. Neither had directly acknowledged the deepening feelings between them, maintaining a careful propriety despite their frequent meetings. Not if you remain the man you are, she answered honestly. I don't oppose the council because it exists, but because it's been controlled by men who care only about their own interests. Colt nodded thoughtfully. There's another consideration. He hesitated, then continued. If I run for council, people will scrutinize all my associations. Our collaboration on the water project is already the subject of town gossip. Sophia felt her cheeks warm. I'm aware. I don't want to damage your reputation, Sophia. My reputation, she laughed softly. I'm already known as the troublesome spinster who doesn't know her place. I doubt association with a respected property owner will worsen that. You're hardly a spinster at 26, Colt said with a hint of amusement, and anyone who doesn't value your mind and spirit is a fool. Their eyes met, and the unspoken feelings between them seemed to fill the space. For weeks they had maintained careful boundaries, their interactions proper despite their growing closeness. But in that moment, something shifted. Sophia, Colt said, his voice low and serious, I need to be honest with you. My interest in running for council, in improving this town, it's genuine. But my interest in spending time with you has nothing to do with water systems or town politics. Her heart quickened. What does it have to do with, then? Everything else. He moved slightly closer on the porch bench. Your intelligence, your courage, your compassion. The way you see possibilities others miss. The way you've never once let anyone make you feel less than the remarkable woman you are. Colt, she began, but he gently continued. I know this began as a practical partnership, but for me, it's become much more. His eyes held hers steadily. I'm falling in love with you, Sophia. I think I have been since that first day when you stood up to the entire council. The declaration, though not entirely unexpected, still took her breath away. For a moment, she couldn't find words. If you don't feel the same, he added quickly, I'll understand. Our work together can continue as before, but I couldn't in good conscience consider a public role without being honest about my feelings. I do, Sophia said softly, feel the same. The admission felt both terrifying and inevitable. I've tried to be practical about it, to focus on our common goals, but, he prompted gently when she paused, but I've never met anyone who sees me as you do, who values my mind and respects my opinions, who treats me as an equal partner rather than someone to be guided or tolerated. She smiled slightly. It's rather impossible not to fall in love with that. The joy that spread across Colt's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He reached for her hand, holding it gently between both of his. I don't want to rush you or create difficulties with your father or the town, but I needed you to know. I'm glad you told me, Sophia said, marveling at the warmth of his touch and the openness of his expression. Though it does rather complicate your potential council candidacy. He laughed softly. Some things are worth complication. In the distance, they could hear Mrs. Larson returning from her visit to a neighboring farm. The sound gently reminded them of proprieties that, despite their declarations, still needed to be observed. Colt reluctantly released Sophia's hand. I should speak with your father. Yes, she agreed, both nervous and exhilarated at the thought, though I think he suspects already. He's been remarkably accommodating about all my visits here. Wise man, Colt smiled. Would tomorrow evening be too soon? I could come to the mercantile after closing. Tomorrow would be perfect. As Sophia prepared to leave, their interaction maintained its outward propriety, but their eyes conveyed the profound shift that had occurred. Something new had begun, something both had been moving toward since that first meeting outside the town hall. The following evening, Jacob Zimmerman received Colt's request for a private conversation with knowing eyes and a barely concealed smile. He led Colt into the small sitting room behind the mercantile, while Sophia busied herself in the kitchen, ostensibly making tea but actually straining to hear the men's conversation. "I imagine I know what this is about, young man," she heard her father say. "You've been spending a great deal of time with my daughter." "Yes, sir." Colt's voice was respectful but steady. "I've come to ask your blessing to court Sophia formally. My intentions are honorable and my circumstances sufficiently established to provide for her properly." There was a pause, and Sophia held her breath. "And what of my daughter's unconventional ideas?" Jacob asked. "Her strong opinions about women's roles and town governance have deterred other suitors. With all due respect, sir, those aren't deterrents to me but attractions. Sophia's intelligence and conviction are qualities I deeply admire. I don't seek a wife whose mind is subservient to mine, but a true partner." Sophia's heart swelled at his words. This was precisely why she had fallen in love with him, his genuine respect for who she truly was. "You realize," her father continued, "that marrying Sophia means inheriting her causes as well. The town council may not appreciate having her advocacy strengthened by marriage to a man they can't easily dismiss." "I'm prepared for that," Colt replied firmly. "In fact, I've been encouraged to run for council myself. If elected, I would work to ensure all voices in Cody are heard, including those the current leadership prefers to silence." Another pause followed, then her father's voice, warm with approval. "You have my blessing, Colton. I believe you'll make my daughter happy and, more importantly, allow her to be herself. That's all any father can truly ask." "Thank you, sir. I promise to honor your trust." When Sophia entered with the tea tray moments later, trying to appear as though she hadn't been listening, both men stood. Her father's eyes were suspiciously moist, and Colt's expression was one of barely contained joy. "Sophia," Colt said, stepping toward her, "with your father's blessing, I would like to court you properly, though I believe we've been courting in all but name these past months." "We have," she agreed, setting down the tray and allowing him to take her hands in his. "And my answer is yes." The weeks that followed were the happiest Sophia could remember. Their courtship, now open and approved, continued alongside their civic work. The water improvement proposal gained final approval from the council in early September, a victory that felt doubly sweet because they had achieved it together. Colt officially announced his candidacy for town council, with a platform centered on balanced development and inclusive governance. Though Porter and his allies were initially dismissive, Colt's thoughtful approach and genuine connection with citizens across all parts of town gradually won support. Their engagement, announced in late September, surprised few in Cody. The wedding was planned for November, after the election, but before winter set in fully. As the day approached, Sophia found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. "What are you thinking about?" Colt asked one evening as they walked along the creek that ran through his property, their property soon. "How differently things might have turned out," she replied. "If you hadn't been at that town meeting, if you hadn't spoken to me afterward." "I like to think we would have found each other anyway," he said, squeezing her hand. "Some things are meant to be, perhaps, but it might have taken much longer without Porter and his cronies being so dismissive." She smiled up at him. "Their worst behavior brought out your best." "And yours," he countered. "Your courage that day was what drew me to you initially. Standing alone before all those men, refusing to be silenced, it was magnificent." "I wasn't feeling magnificent," Sophia admitted. "I was angry and frustrated. Years of being dismissed, having my ideas ignored simply because I'm a woman. It wears on the spirit." Colt stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "That's going to change, Sophia, not just for you but for all the women in Cody. If I'm elected, I promise you'll have a voice in council decisions not just through me, but in your own right." "And if you're not elected?" she asked, though polls suggested he would win handily. "Then we'll continue as we've begun, building support, demonstrating through results that inclusive governance works better." He smiled, touching her cheek gently. "I'm in this fight for the long haul. We both are." "Yes," Sophia agreed, leaning into his touch. "We are." The November morning of their wedding dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow dusting the mountains. The small church in Cody was filled with friends and supporters, a community that had witnessed their partnership bloom into love. As Sophia walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she saw Colt waiting for her, his expression one of pure joy. 3 days earlier, he had won the council election by a significant margin, the first step in the changes they hoped to bring to their town. But in this moment, politics and water systems were far from her mind. When they exchanged vows, Colt had added a personal promise to the traditional words. "I will honor your mind and spirit as much as your heart. Your thoughts will always have a place at our table, your voice in all our decisions. This I swear." The addition brought tears to Sophia's eyes and approving murmurs from the congregation. It was, in many ways, a public declaration of the principles that had brought them together. The celebration afterward at the newly renovated Wakefield Ranch was joyous and inclusive, with guests from all quarters of Cody. Even Mayor Hollister and Councilman Porter attended, though the latter's congratulations seemed somewhat forced. "You've won this round," Porter muttered to Colt during the festivities, quiet enough that only the groom and nearby Sophia could hear. "But the council isn't a place for idealistic notions. You'll learn that soon enough." "Perhaps," Colt replied evenly. "Or perhaps the council will learn something from new perspectives. Either way, Mr. Porter, I look forward to working with you for the good of all Cody's citizens." As Porter walked away, visibly disgruntled, Sophia squeezed her husband's hand. Diplomatic as always. "One catches more flies with honey," Colt said with a wink. Though in Porter's case, it might take a whole hive. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and they were finally alone in their home, Colt led Sophia to the library he had completed as a wedding gift to her. The shelves were now filled with books her collection and his combined, plus several new volumes he had ordered specially. "There's one more thing," he said, leading her to a handsome desk placed near the window with the best light. "This is yours. Mine." Sophia ran her hand over the smooth oak surface, taking in the elegant craftsmanship. "I made it specifically for you, for writing, research, whatever pursuits you choose." He opened one of the drawers to reveal a stack of fresh paper, quality pens, and a leather-bound journal. "I thought perhaps you might consider writing about your experiences advocating for change, challenging the old systems. Other women could benefit from your insights." Touched beyond words, Sophia turned to embrace him. "It's perfect. Thank you for understanding what matters to me." "Always," he promised, holding her close. "Your mind was the first thing I fell in love with, Sophia. I never want to see that light dimmed." As they stood together in the library that would witness many future discussions and plans, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that first confrontation at the town hall to this moment of perfect partnership, they had built something rare and precious, a relationship founded on mutual respect, shared purpose, and deep love. Outside, the first heavy snow of winter began to fall, blanketing their land in pristine white. But inside, warmth and possibility filled every corner of their home. Together, they would build not just a life but a legacy of change for Cody, proving through their example that when men and women worked as equals, communities thrived. "What are you thinking?" Colt asked softly, noticing her contemplative expression. That some battles are worth fighting, Sophia answered, especially when you find the right ally to fight them with. He smiled, understanding completely. Partners, he said, kissing her gently. In everything, she agreed. The years that followed proved the truth of their partnership. Colt's term on the council expanded to 3, during which Cody implemented not only the water improvements, but also educational reforms. Expanded voting rights for property-owning women, a partial victory Sophia considered just the beginning, and more equitable development across all quarters of town. Sophia's influence extended beyond her husband's position. She established a women's civic association that provided organized advocacy on issues from public health to education. Her articles on local governance, published first in the Cody newspaper and eventually in regional publications, brought attention to their innovative approach. Their family grew alongside their civic accomplishments, first with twin boys who inherited their father's quiet strength and their mother's questioning mind, then a daughter whose determination matched both parents. Their home became a center for community discussion and progress. The library Colt had built filling with books and papers that documented their ongoing work. Mayor Porter, as he eventually became despite their opposition, never fully embraced their vision for Cody, but the tide of public opinion increasingly favored the inclusive approach the Wakefields championed. By the time their oldest children were approaching adulthood in the early 1900s, Cody had transformed into a model of progressive frontier governance. "We didn't change the world," Colt observed on their 20th anniversary as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "But we changed our corner of it, and showed others it could be done," Sophia added, her hand resting comfortably in his as it had countless times over the years. "That's a legacy worth having." He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening with the expression that still made her heart quicken. "The best legacy is sitting at our dinner table, every night 3 young people who have never questioned that a woman's mind is equal to a man's, who understand that leadership means serving all people, not just those who look and think like you, and who witness daily what partnership in marriage truly means," Sophia added softly. "That might be the most revolutionary example we've set." Colt nodded, lifting her hand to kiss it gently. "The day I said I trust your mind outside that town hall, I had no idea where it would lead us." "Didn't you?" Sophia teased. "I thought you planned everything meticulously." "Some things even I couldn't plan," he admitted with a chuckle. "Finding a partner whose vision matched mine, whose courage challenged me to be better, whose love made every victory sweeter and every setback bearable. That was providence, not planning." As the last light faded from the sky, they remained on the porch, still discovering after all these years new things to discuss, new challenges to face together. The battles had changed over time, but their approach remained constant, equal partners, united in purpose, trusting each other's minds and hearts completely. In a time and place where such partnership between man and woman was rare, they had built something revolutionary with quiet persistence. Not through grand gestures or fiery speeches, but through daily demonstrations of respect, through consistent advocacy for inclusion, through unwavering belief in each other. And in doing so, they had changed not just water systems and town ordinances, but the very culture of their community, creating space for new voices, new ideas, and new possibilities that would continue long after them. It had begun with a dismissed petition and a simple declaration of trust. It had grown into a lifetime of love and purposeful action, and its effects would ripple outward for generations to come, touching lives they would never know, but who would benefit from the path they had pioneered together.